Colleagues, good evening to you. I was not supposed to be speaking at this evening's meeting, but I have exercised my discretion as the leader of this party to speak. Things dread. Things too dread for the Barbados Labour Party not to maintain the momentum. The report that was presented to the country by the governor of the central bank has indicated that the situation in Barbados has gone from crisis to calamity. The economy is no longer, in his view, stable. It is stagnant. And that should tell you everything that you need to know. When he is prepared to acknowledge that all of the predictions for growth has come to naught, and that our economy is stagnant. Government revenue is falling despite the fact that government has exhausted every way of increasing taxes, and despite the fact that the Minister of Finance has ordered cuts in the expenditure. Things are dread. Real dread. And I might have, on previous occasions, said that the task that will face the next government of Barbados surely will be the stiffest task to face any administration in this country. And it behoves us in the Barbados Labour Party to begin to engage in a great conversation with the people of Barbados. A big engagement must start. We must begin a program of public education on a scale that has never before been attempted by any political institution in this country, to tell the people what it is that faces them, and to be able to explain what it is that must be done. And we must begin that process next week, not to talk to the people, but to talk with the people. And that beginning next week, in addition to our public meetings, we are going to have a series of people's forums. To go to the people and tell the people these are the circumstances facing you, your family, and your children. This is what needs to be done. This is what it has to be done. And it isn't that we want to victimize anybody. The situation has gone from crisis to calamity. So there has to be a big engagement. And the big engagement has to be on the matters that the Democratic Labour Party feels that it can duck from, or the matters that the Democratic Labour Party feels that it can steal an election on. And this evening I've come to talk about something called privatization. Because this is one of the big things that must be talked about if we are going to bring this country from calamity. And if we are going to do that which we must do, bring about a brighter and better future for Barbados. A brighter and better tomorrow for Barbados. This is our mission. So there has to be a discussion on the big ones. And we're glad that the nation tried to start it. But the situation is so serious that we have to go to the people and talk to the people and let the people understand things rather than let them be beguiled by what is about to happen in this country. And I say that because the Democratic Labour Party is showing its hands. In warfare, the best tactic is a thing called diversion. When somebody thinks you are going to attack from the north, you attack from the south. And that you turn a person's greatest strength into weakness, or turn your greatest weakness into strength. The Democratic Party cannot come back to the people of this country and ask for any support on the basis of performance. The whole campaign is beginning to show itself, and it is to be based on something called a diversion. 10,000. And why is the 10,000 a diversion? In June 2007, when we were about to be asked by the people of this country to pass on responsibility to the Democratic Party, there was 133,000 of your brothers and sisters employed in Barbados. 133,000 Barbadians were employed at June 2007. In June 2012, 123,000 Barbadians were employed. So 10,000 Barbadians, 10,000 of our citizens, 10,000 of our brothers and sisters less now are working under the Democratic Labour Party and under the Barbados State Party. 10,000 less employed. But the fact is, if 10,000 less are now employed, and you know that at least 5,000 has been taken on in the public sector, then at least 50,000 has in fact lost their jobs in the private. But let us work with the 10,000, because we know for sure that 10,000 less Barbadians are working now than when the Labour Party had control of this country's affairs. And why the 10,000? Now, rather than ask the people of Barbados to focus on their record, under which 10,000 Barbadians less are working now, they want to create a bogeyman and a scare that if you send back this Barbados Labour Party, 10,000 will lose their jobs in the future. And as you can see from the ads in the Nation, in the Advocate, and the propaganda by every Democratic Labour Party minister, this election is to be about not the 10,000 souls who have gone home, but the 10,000 who you are to imagine might go home under the Barbados Labour Party administration. And we have a duty and a responsibility as a party not to allow ourselves and the country to be taken by this diversion. And it is being sold that we are coming with a program to privatize, and privatization is going to lead to the loss of 10,000 jobs. And this evening I've come to start that discussion with you. I had a full week, I have a full week ahead, but it cannot stay for a moment longer. Privatization I use the word privatization because privatization does not mean that you're selling everything, although it involves that in part. But it can also mean that you are seeking to involve the private sector in enterprises that have been run by the state. Or it can also mean that you want to get workers involved in the ownership of institutions, because think for a minute. If you're working at the port, would it not be a nice thing at some stage for you, not just to be able to work for the government, but to work for yourself? And if you're working at the port, are you working for yourself, and at the end of the year you can get a little dividend? Would you not set out to make the port a better port and a more efficient port if you are interested in it? So it involves that too. And it involves sometimes making sure that if the private sector has to depend upon an activity, rather than the state controlling it and putting the private sector in peril, let the private sector be responsible more for the things that bear upon whether they're going to succeed or fail. Tourism people have been calling upon the government, rather than the foolishness that you're doing at the tourism authority, why don't you create a marketing thing that we can own and that we can run good? So privatization is what we're talking about. And we are saying to Barbados, for 5 reasons that I can talk about this evening, because the discussion started, for 5 reasons, that we have to go as far as possible, not just with selling things, but with involving private people more in the ownership of enterprises in this country, if we are to bring back this country. The first good reason is that the government got a financial mess that has to be cleaned up. Government can't pay its bills, and this is known. And the biggest drain on the government's capacity to pay its bills is what it has to send to state institutions, all of which is not necessarily used for inefficient purposes. And we'll come to that too. But a lot of it is used for corrupt purposes. We'll talk about that this evening too. And for government to fleece the pockets of its supporters. So that if you can get the public financial problem under control, you've got to deal with it and stop the loss and the hemorrhage to the state enterprises. That's the first. The second is that it is becoming clearer and clearer and clearer now that corruption at the ministerial level in this democratic body is rampant. And it is rampant at the level of state enterprises like the Barbados Water Authority. And the only way in which you can be able to deal with rampant ministerial corruption is to be able to move some of these things from out to the public sector and let them be under the control of the private sector, or workers at them have some say in how they are being run. Because that's what privatization involves. So we need privatization as well to be able to stop ministerial corruption. And Labour Party, under Labour Party administration, I fire people for less than that. The third reason is that in instances where the private sector has to depend upon state organizations, the absence of private sector involvement in them is burying this economy under inefficient and ineffective administration. And the tourism sector is the clearest example of it. A sector that cannot progress because of cronyism at the level of the board and between the government, the minister, and his board. And nothing can happen in tourism because the BTA has become a joke. Political cronyism is stopping us from proceeding properly, and that got to change. The fourth good reason is because these state enterprises, especially CBC, are being used to perpetuate a thing called party paramountcy at the people's expense. And it is a disgrace that in the modern Barbados, state enterprises are being used almost entirely for the benefit of a political institution at the taxpayers' expense, and that has to stop. But you know, I say that there has to be a process of public education. And today, I have walked with 2 things that I want us, as a matter of urgency, to distribute to our candidates, distribute to the media too. And to become the subject of the basis upon which we start to discuss this matter with the public. Have you ever heard of Michael Manley? Michael Manley was the Prime Minister of Jamaica between 1974 and 1980, and he lost the government. And he lost the government and came back in 1989, a different man. The Michael Manley between 74 and 1980 believed in state control of the commanding heights of the economy. The state enterprises had to run everything. He nationalized the tourism industry. He nationalized the sugar industry. And the state had to be in control. And he realized that state control and just pumping things into inefficient state organizations is what helped carry down Jamaica. And in 1989, when Michael Manley came back, he was a different person. And I must say that an aspect of the greatness of the man is that he was able to not only acknowledge what he did wrong, but write it down for the benefit of every generation of Caribbean politician. Because he was challenged in the same way that you hear Leroy Trotman talking about moving away from your philosophical moorings. Michael Manley was challenged as well. Why is it that you who had this philosophical disposition have no change, and you talk about letting the private sector help and privatization? And Michael Manley wrote, there's a, and colleagues, I want this to be made available to all of our candidates and the media. There's a journal called Small Acts. And in it, there's perhaps one of the most wonderful pieces of correspondence between any Caribbean leader and a university professor, between Michael Manley and Carrie Levitt. Carrie Levitt was the George Beckford Professor of Political Economy at the University of the West Indies. She's an outstanding economist, wrote a book called The Debt Trap. No, she didn't write The Debt Trap. But anyhow, in it, you will find an exchange between Michael Manley and Carrie Levitt, explaining why he who believed in state ownership and control before came to the view that the Jamaica Omnibus Service had to be privatized, that the hotel industry had to be privatized, why Air Jamaica had to be privatized. And you all need to read it. But then, the day after Michael Manley, and young politicians do not trade papers, you hear? The day after Michael Manley lost, a few days after his resignation, he gave an interview to Global Viewpoint editor Nathan Gardel, in which he spoke about privatization in these terms. And this was his justification, principal justification for wanting to privatize. He says he become like Margaret Thatcher. He said, but I am also different. He said, I want the workers to become shareholders. The workers' movement must be led out of its traditional pattern of thought. Instead of being time clock adversities of the owner, they should want to become owners themselves. I would like to get to the point where one day the workers don't need a time clock. Instead, they will come to work because they not only get a paycheck, but because a dividend payment will be waiting for them at the end of the year. My dream is that one day there can be a society where egalitarianism means that every single person is a shareholder in the market economy. Now, I explain why that is relevant to our circumstances now. Because I do that privatization don't mean you just sell to everybody. But you involve the workers in owning what they work at. And they don't only work for the government, they work for themselves. And they look forward not just to getting only a paycheck, but also look forward to getting the dividends, because the way to make enterprises more efficient is to give people who are working at them a vested interest in what is happening around them. And colleagues, Barbados urgently needs that now. But it isn't that it only urgently needs that now. That was exactly, Mr. Leroy Trotman, the kind of privatization that I sat down with you and brought to Barbados. And I want to talk about it because I am glad that it is Leroy Trotman and Leroy Trotman who is leading the government charge on this matter. Now, you all are being made to believe that we're coming to just sell out the transport board, as if we don't have a record. And what is our record? That yes, under us, the transport board was bleeding. And the biggest hemorrhage was coming from the workshop. You remember that? Yes. And they were employed by the transport board. You remember that? Yes. And I sat down with Leroy Trotman. I said, Leroy, we got to deal with this. The financial hemorrhage got to stop. But I don't want to send home people because we got to solve a financial problem. Can we not conceive of a situation where we allow these people working at the workshop to own the company, sell the service to the government, and convert a problem into a solution? And I told, remember that? And I told him, we are not going to leave you empty-handed, man. The government is going to invest, it was $1 million, do you remember, $2 million in it? $2 million. That's what privatization can mean. Take some of these state enterprises, let the workers take over the enterprise, sell back the service to the government, so you stop the hemorrhage and you deepen egalitarianism in the country. Now that is what Leroy Trotman should be telling the public. That the Owen Arthur he knows, it's not the Owen Arthur who wants to send 10,000 people, but I there's a problem with the enterprise. Sit down and find a way how you can deepen people's participation in it so as to be able to convert their problem into a solution. And that is what he should be telling his friend Frandel. Rather than being on a foolish bandwagon, nonsense, that the only way in which you can carry out privatization is if you send home people. UCAL is the model that he used, following the Michael Manley approach. That really is the enlightened approach, that wherever you need to and you can, get the people involved in their own enterprises, and you will be able to find that you've got to stop passing over money to the enterprises, and you can make the country become a property-owning democracy. Do you all have that kind of dream for Barbados too? No, I say I am glad that Leroy Trotman has started this discussion, you know. Because the two instances in which I was involved in the privatization of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, he was also involved in the enterprises. Don't you remember the Barbados National Bank? We inherited that bank as a bank that was small and losing money. You remember? Made it into a commercial bank. But then it was too small to be able to get large loans, so it was always going to struggle. And I said, well, how am I going to build out this bank? What did we do? We offered 51% of the shares first to workers' organization, the trade union movements, remember? And the workers. David Thompson, a villain. And these things have to be said. Told the people of Barbados, don't buy. But he bought for he and his children. So the Thompson family owned shares in the same BNB that we offered to the credit unions and the workers. They said, look, we'll take 51% of this. And the them tell them, don't buy. And Leroy Trotman resigned from the board of the BNB because they says we've got to bring a partner for it. Resigned on the grounds that it can cause it to lose jobs. Well, colleagues, I'm here to tell you today that the BNB now, as a result of privatization by the Barbados Labour Party, is employing twice as many people as when we were the only owners of it. And the 20% that we own it now is worth more than when we own the entire bank. So that the notion that if you have enlightened, serious privatization, it has to lead to a mass loss of jobs is disproven by the BNB experience. And Trotman should come back and tell the public how wrong he was then as now to be spreading this bogey nonsense that privatization has to lead to loss of job. It depends on how you do it. So I deal with that first. That if we are going to address one of the best ways by which we can make this country become more egalitarian, a property-owning democracy, a more efficient society, is by getting people to go to work, not just to work for the government, but to work for themselves. And that's the mission that we are upon. We started it. We are not going to be deflected from it. That is the mission on which we are now embarked. Must be so. And of course, in public service, there are so many things that you can get people to do better if they've got a vested interest in doing it for themselves rather than do it for an employer, say, call the government. So, colleagues, first of all, I'm with Michael Manley on this. I was in Jamaica when he sought to take over the commanding heights of the economy, and it caused the economy to fail. And I believe in media, and I want you to read these things. That's how you correct the problems that exist. And that's where we have to go, first of all. Help us to build a society in which people can work for themselves and become property owners and shareholders. We're taking some of these government entities and sell them principally to the workers. And you know, they went as far as, I didn't say what we can do, but we went as far as we need to go. Secondly, privatization must be called upon to stop what is rampant now in this Democratic Labour Party, ministerial corruption. The Democratic Labour Party wants to hold on to state enterprises because their ministers love it. And their ministers love it because they are fleecing these state organizations or learn these state organizations to be fleeced by their supporters. So I hope that you read this evening the letter that Wesley Chandler wrote to Friendly Store. But this is illustrative of what is wrong with our state enterprises and why we need to get the workers involved in owning some of them and private entities involved in owning some of them to stop this kind of things that you can hear me read about that Dennis Lowe did at the Sanitation Authority. Now, Wesley Chandler, since you know him well, he's from Burns Road. He's a dem of class. Dem of class. And he wrote Friendly Straw on 26th of January in these terms. He says, I have been a member of the Democratic Labour Party since 1986. I wish to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the board of the Sanitation Service Authority. He said, I do not want to continue to serve as a member of this board with the current minister. That minister is the representative for this constituency, Mr. Dennis Lowe. The minister chairs meeting on a regular basis. Now, a minister chairing meetings of a board is against the law. You understand why we're going to privatize some of them? That you're going to stop ministers from feeling that the board belongs to them and that they can go and chair meeting of boards. But it ain't stopped there. The minister didn't just chair meeting of boards to make things that go well. He says, and this should not be so. Wesley boy, I agree with you. One matter which I would like to draw your attention to has to do with a truck that the minister asked to be sent back to Autocraft Engineering that is owned by a Mr. Power, as you know, who was one of the DLP big supporters in the last election. Fatted calf. To be fixed for a price of over $74,000. Just to fix a truck, you know. $74,000 of our money lick out. Without having the 3 quotations as is usually required. This requirement was outlined to the minister by members of the Sanitation Service Authority management team, as well as the new Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Drainage. I am concerned about the behavior of the minister in insisting that the truck be fixed without obtaining the required quotations. This is a serious situation, especially when elections are around the corner. I am concerned what this can do to the image of the party if it gets out. Once again, thanks for the opportunity to serve, and I will remain a loyal member of the DLP, willing to serve in any capacity offered to me. Now, this is a DLP man of long standing, sick to his stomach at the way in which statutory institutions use contrary to the law in a manner that involves the breach of the financial rules. And if this was the only isolated instance of this, perhaps we can say, well, we've been too hard on the statutory institutions. But have you forgotten the Barbados Water Authority? Where $800,000 of our taxpayers' money have been given out by a chairman who should not have been the chairman. Not a pipe nor a screw delivered. Money ain't recovered. All money leak out. Nobody ain't get locked up. And do you understand why we have to put the taxpayers' money beyond the reach of corrupt ministers who feel that boards and the taxpayers' resources in those boards belong to them? But DLP bring it on. if you all want to talk about the need for privatization, privatization in this country is required to stop ministerial corruption on the scale that has been taking place at the Sanitation Authority and at the Water Authority. And at the Water Authority in a more fundamental way. We need to be told why we should continue to have a water authority without the workers especially being able to say what happens to their institution. In a situation where a Minister of Finance can say that he is not prepared to sign a letter of comfort, he is not prepared to sign a letter of comfort for the Water Authority, and we cannot get an explanation as to what could have been so wrong with those contractual obligations that the Water Authority are about to enter into, that a minister said, I am not signing this letter of comfort to let you have access to funding. You understand why this can't continue? Because these statutory boards are being used by these ministers to be able to indulge in financial impropriety on a scale that can break this country at a time when you are struggling week by week to pay like bills. We got people who are laying off the gardeners and the maids. The rampant, the biggest case for us to get into this and put these statutory institutions in a condition where they are accountable, their behavior is transparent, where no minister can now in the future use them in the way in which law has used them and in which the Water Authority is using them, is through having private engagement in it. And look, there's some things that need to be said, man. I went to Parliament when they started being the Prime Minister of the country and said, this is what I have. A house at West Terrace, a few shares and a few savings account. This is all I have after 14 years as the Prime Minister. I need now to know what Law got. Because they promised that they won't tell us. I need to know what he had at the start of the term and what he got now. And how he get what he got now. I need to know that. I need to know what Michael Lashley got. And I need to know where he get it from. I need to know. I need to see before the election the pledge of the honoring of the most important pledge by the Democratic Labour Party in the last election, that their members were going to come and show us what it is that they have. They fought an election that we were corrupt people. I said, this is what I have. Well, bring it to account. All of them, bring it now. Let us know what you had then, what you got now, and how you got now. So that if they want us to stop talking about privatization, sign the letter of comfort then, Mr. Minister of Finance, because then that would give me the assurance that nothing was wrong with the contract at the Water Authority. And if you want me to start talking about privatization and say we got to deal with it, lock up somebody at the Water Authority for that $800,000 that gone to buy pipes and so on, that we can get either the pipes or the money back. Got to be this way. And Labour Party, you all go to the next government of Barbados. Zero tolerance to ministerial corruption, please. I said that privatization is not just about selling public assets, but it's also about changing the relationship, the involvement of private entities in the running of state organizations, especially in instances where those state organizations can have a bearing on private sector activity. And there's no doubt that a large part of Barbados' problem in the tourist sector is precisely because political cronyism, rather than effectiveness and efficiency, has taken over the most important economic institution in this country, the Barbados Tourism Authority. People just stop you to talk to you about it. They're sick to their stomach in the way in which a small core of political cronies have taken over the Barbados Tourism Authority. And the tourism sector has called upon the government, says, look, we are begging you, open up this sector to new institutional arrangements. Let us move away from the old arrangement where a state agency was the only agency marketing. And let us have now a new situation where the private sector can become involved in the marketing of the tourism sector by having a new public-private sector agency to market it. Is something wrong with that? Don't you know that how fast our tourism sector will go forward if you could put that in place? And I am absolutely satisfied that you need to do that not only in the tourism authority, but in other institutions as well. Now, we need to get this economy back on track. But how can I get the Barbados economy back on track? Not only with what is happening in the Barbados Tourism Authority, that needs to be changed, but they're going to put a man called Leroy McLean in charge of the second most important economic institution in this country. Now, Leroy McLean, as I have said before, the man, recent studies have been on the genetic characteristics of Barbadian black belly sheep. Now, don't laugh. This is a fact. The man has done a study on black belly sheep. But this is the man that the Dems have put in charge of the institution that is supposed to go and promote Barbadian manufacturing. The man don't have a clue about manufacturing or investment, but he has been put there because political cronyism is the way in which, the purpose for which the Dems want these state enterprises to exist. And in the case of this man, because he has to be described, you should have people from the private sector and the industrial sector helping to run the IDC in the interest of the manufacturers and the investors of Barbados. But this man's only industrial experience was that he borrowed money from the old Barbados Development Bank and did not pay back. Remember? He did not pay back. He was on the board of the Barbados Agricultural Development Corporation and went and lived in a plantation house and would not pay rent and say he can fix up the house in lieu of paying rent. But that is the man now that the government has put. He ain't back credit union. Oh, Lord. Colleagues, how can we go forward in situations where these state institutions that ought to be responsible for coming forward with policies on behalf of their shareholders, stakeholders, are now being run by these men who ought to be in a location cooling out near St. Philip? And I made no apologies for saying so, because that may strongly to you. In every instance where a state organization's activities can bear upon whether the private sector entities can succeed or not, the principal role in what those state institutions are doing should be as a result of the direct involvement and input, not just of political appointees, but people from the private sector who live and depend on it. And it's not only in relation to the Tourism Authority and the BIDC. What is wrong with the people from the cultural industries having a role to play in what the NCF do? What is wrong with that? We can't get these cultural industries of Barbados to get off the ground. Why? Because we don't have the correct institutional arrangements in respect of the development of our culture. And we said that we were going to have a commercial entity owned jointly by the government and the private sector. That's what privatization means. Private involvement in the running of these institutions for the benefit of society, rather than entities running them just merely for the sake of political cronies. And across all of the institutions in Barbados that have a bearing on how the country economy is run, there is a role that must be performed by private entities in helping to run things better and more efficiently, and they want to use privatization to bring about the efficient operation of public entities, and also to pass on some of the obligations that the state used to assume to the private sector. And what can be wrong with it? But the Dems want the status quo to remain because the Dems understand what is the benefit to the status quo for them, for their and their cronies. I say also that privatization is necessary in this country if the case of the CBC and other institutions are involved, because the perpetuation of the state control of these institutions is allowing the paramountcy of the party rather than the interests of the people to be the dominant aspect of the operation of these institutions. Last night, colleagues, you know what was the lead item on CBC? Nothing to do with Barbados welfare, you know. It was, I think, Senator Hunt, Reginald Hunt. Reginald Hunt led off. The news was about Labour Party is some corrupt. That is what CBC has come to. And if ever there was an argument in support of privatizing public institutions, it is the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. It has become an institutional cesspool. It really is bad. That they were telling me Mia Molly was leader of this party, she offered to buy time on the CBC so that the voice of this party could be heard. And the CBC said, you can't buy time on CBC to be heard by the people of Barbados. There's got to be something wrong, and immoral and amoral about that too. And colleagues, look, don't come to office feeling that we will use the CBC like how the Dems use it. No! There must be a flow. The freedom and democracy in any serious society depends upon an informed citizenship. And it's an abomination. It is wrong. And Barbados is the only place in the Caribbean where there is still a state monopoly on the issue of television broadcast. The only country in the Caribbean where the state, everybody has opened up the television broadcast market to competition. Guyana. Everybody else. But why? Because to use the state institution purely for the purposes of party paramountcy. And it is not only at the CBC. At the Rural Development Commission, the General Secretary of the Democratic Labour Party is over there presiding over who gets what and who don't get what. And that's wrong, and it got to stop. And at the UDC, it's the same thing. But CBC, how could CBC not feel shame that a Barbadian citizen was awarded $1 million by the courts for a wrong that was done to it by this government, and not a word was said on our public broadcast television? This is wrong. This is wrong. So colleagues, do not believe that we should ever become a government again and use the agencies of the state for the enrichment of ministers, for the enrichment of our supporters, nor for the dominance of our party. And the Democratic Labour Party has carried these three things: plumb new depths of public immorality with them. And we must restore good governance to this country, but also deal with the conversion of problems into opportunities by seeing the involvement of our people in enterprises that are now presently owned by the state as an important part of the way forward. I keep telling you that in 1994, I told the International Monetary Fund, let us trust the people. Privatization does not mean that we can take up the things and just sell them to whoever will come. That's how the Dems did it. The Dems' use of privatization was to concentrate ownership in the hotel industry by selling Hayward's to Amma Beach. We are now paying a price for that. We sought to privatize the BNB by offering it to the credit unions and the workers. And the privatization of the transport board was to take the mechanic workshop, sell it to a garage, let the workers run it, own it, and sell the service to the government and to whoever else. And we therefore are excited in the Barbados Labour Party by showing that you can, as Michael Manley did. And I want everybody to what Michael Manley said, you know. The man came back and said, this is what I have. See, you can call me like Tasha. Don't mind. But I need to do it to make Jamaica a more egalitarian society by letting people go to work and work for themselves, and not just for a wage, but also for the first time to be able to work for a dividend. And you know, I am resolute. My parents never owned shares in anything in this country. They own a little shop But they did not live out the Barbados dream that we had to become a property-owning democracy, where the ordinary man and the ordinary woman relationship to the economy was not that you sell your labor, but that you had a vested interest in owning something in this land. As a person who was a prime minister, only I got owned was a few shares in a bank that I bought and had not bought anything else. But I would like to see shareholding being a normal, natural thing enjoyed by most Barbadians. And the best way to deal with it is to take many of these state enterprises now and let the public become owners of parts of them. And that you can find that when the public own them and can profit from them by dividends, they can work harder to make them more profitable, and they can work harder to make them operate better in the interest of this Barbadian society. So Democratic Labour Party, bring it on. We are ready to join you on this issue of privatization, man. I've been waiting for this moment. But I want really to give an assurance to the workers of Barbados. I trust that workers of Barbados will not be taken in by this baloney, this crap. That people want to become a government to send home 10,000 people from the public service of Barbados. I mean, at least judge us by what you know, not only that we stand for, but what we did. We promised you 30,000 jobs, and we did 35,000. But this government has cut employment in Barbados by 10,000. We did not institute the wage cut in 1991, but we paid back. Paid it back. You got back yours, darling? We found Barbadians, ordinary Barbadian citizens, caught up in a tragedy called casual employment. Couldn't go to the bank because the status was not sure. We said we are going to abolish casual employment in this country. We found Barbadians not getting a wage increase for years. We gave them wage increases. We found doctors, nurses, policemen working antisocial hours. And it said, well, look, it's unfair to us just to give us a basic wage. And we said, okay, we can pay you, give you, I think, called a flexi allowance, to pay you for your unsociable work hours. We introduced a new public service act that for the first time gives certainty to people who were either in acting appointments or had temporary appointments. We said that you can't make a man in Barbados or brothers and sisters act indefinitely as if they were in Hollywood. That you act for a certain time, and if you are capable of performing the job, you're appointed to the job. And for temporary appointments, the same thing. So that all that was brought. But most of all, we decided that never again in Barbados should there be a situation where the well-being of the public officers of Barbados should be the anvil on which a policy be forged. That we change the constitution of this country so that no government of this country could again ever change people's conditions to their disadvantage. Now we did that. But when we did it, the Democratic Labour Party voted against the constitutional amendment that would stop a government of this country from cutting public servants' wages to their disadvantage. Now I'm raising this matter because what the Democratic Labour Party should be talking about, what Leroy Trotman should be talking about, is what Delay World told the International Monetary Fund. Because Delay World and the International, he got involved in the most embarrassing conflict with the IMF woman. And he says that we're not into external devaluations. We got to talk about an internal devaluation. An internal devaluation would be a devaluation where the government would have to cut its costs, wage costs, to be able to make the country more competitive. That's what it means. A devaluation makes your country more competitive by reducing your costs, expressed in foreign currency. The internal devaluation, as he used it, is where we make Barbados more competitive by cutting the costs. the main cost to be cut is wages. Not true. An internal devaluation, therefore, will be one in which payroll costs will have to be significantly reduced to be able to make Barbados more competitive. Now, where the public sector is concerned, there's a constitutional impediment to cutting payroll costs by cutting the wage. So the only way in which delayed world's internal devaluation as the solution to our problem can be pursued is by sending home public workers. That got to be true. But I want also to say this. I need to say it too. There can't be two Barbadoses no more. And things that are expected of the Barbados Labour Party must also be expected of the Democratic Labour Party. And delay, not only delay, but Leroy Trotman had jumped into the fray. Trotty, I left the campaign, and the last time we had any conversations, I left the campaign in 2008 to come and settle a conflict that you had with Cable and Wireless. I left looking after the Labour Party business and said Barbados' stability requires that I put country above party, middle of a campaign that we lose it to. I went and settled a wage settlement. So Trotty, if you can give us lectures now about the workers' interests and so on, give us a little update. And what happened with the settlement at Sandy Lane? At Royal Shop. And Trotty, if the Barbados Labour Party was in office, would the country not have been shut down if we take 4 years before we settle an issue like that? And I know since they start to talk, and they want to talk now. Is it not true that I went down to the East Coast and said that it was within my certain knowledge that the unions had effectively agreed to wage fees with the government but would not tell the workers nor the country? I said so. And I have not had a wage negotiated settlement since 2008. And they said, but tell us what the situation is. It said, we have started to negotiate. And those negotiations started when? The wage settlement ended in 2010. We are into 2012 and probably going into 2013. So Trotty and members of the Institute of Establishment, don't tell me about privatization. Give me an update, man, about what was happening to your negotiation with the workers that a wage settlement ended in 2010. Since then, prices in this country has risen by 30%. Trotty and UPW, if the Barbados Labour Party was in office, would you all agree that prices should rise by 30%? Wages are frozen, and you are not even going through the motions of talking about a new wage settlement. No, these things are wrong. These things are wrong. And while they are at it, tell us the status of the promises that were made to the unions of Barbados in the last election. That you're going to get, what, duty-free cars, interest-free mortgages. Tell us about these things, man. This is what the country needs to be told about. Because a new age of accountability has to be brought to bear in our politics. And the workers of Barbados must not be made available to be purchased. That we go to an election with a view to giving the assurance that you can get a better and a brighter tomorrow. Cannot suffice. There must be a big discussion and engagement on the critical choices facing this country. We have started that discussion. We shall not be distracted from it. Our duty is to bring before the public the critical choices that must be made. So I am therefore, as your leader, moving this campaign now to a different forum. We're not only going to be talking to ourselves, but every weekend we will find a major issue to gather in the town hall and to invite the people of Barbados to come and talk to us with it and about it. And they can start this week. And they can start next week. Because we have to trust the people. So I thank you for this opportunity to come to start this great dialogue with the people of Barbados. We shall not be turned back. We shall not be afraid. And trust me, it is all, and you've heard these words, to bring a better and a brighter tomorrow to the people of Barbados. Good night, and God bless you.